Sabrina 90s comic, issue 27. We start out with Sabrina showing up to be a reporter photographer for the school newspaper, and someone happily hires her as a replacement and calls the editor a nut job, while Sabrina is upset because she spent all of last night typing a resume that never got read. He knows Sabrina's full name, and when questioned about it, says that his spies are everywhere, but then says he's just kidding. Then why does he know her full name? It's not because he shares one of her classes or she would recognize him. He tells Sabrina they need some shots of the baseball team practicing and one of the coach, and she's told to jot down a few quotes from him. I can't help but like that she's got an interest in journalism like in the show, but a different continuity would be a great excuse to give her a different career path for change. Bradley sure talks too much. Sabrina does what she was told and is called polite. Am I supposed to care about what the assistant principal is saying to the baseball player? Because Sabrina's not involved in the conversation. So this might just be dialogue trying to foreshadow something that'll happen later. Whatever, it's too mundane for me. Then the next day, Harvey shows Sabrina a paper and sees headlines saying that Kraft told his coach that he has to win and that he called the coach Big Nose. Minutes later, Sabrina tells Bradley that she didn't shoot this picture for that story, and she asks who overheard this conversation because she was there and no one else was close to them. He did say that his spies were everywhere. He says that he can't reveal sources. Is he a witch? That'd be exciting. Wouldn't it make more sense if it was explained that Sabrina had a bug put on her to record everything? Then Kraft calls him out, and Bradley says that he'd be happy to interview him this afternoon. So this is all working for him. You'd think the principal could just expel him whenever he wants, though. And he'd be worried about that. Sabrina says that she doesn't like being manipulated, and yet she somehow trusts him again. What makes her think he won't do the same thing again? The plot would end by now. She could quit now and then wait for the next editor to be hired. It'd make more sense if the first photo was taken by Gina or Harvey, or better yet, anyone too outside her social circle to warn her. After Kraft complains that he never said that and he was taken out of context, it's revealed that Sabrina's camera bag has a hidden micro-recorder and transmitter. It was very stilted dialogue, having this all explained to us by being said out loud by someone who already knows about this going on. You know what would be better? It'd be better if the art simply showed us the micro-recorder like I was imagining it when saying the script, and had a text box over it saying what is. It could be shaped like a literal bug. This kind of text would make sense in narration, because it says, "Little does Sabrina know." Usually the dialogue isn't stilted in this comic, but this dialogue was stilted like the dialogue of the early Sonic comic. Why is he smirking? Wouldn't it be more realistic if he was just smiling normally like before? Why does he have anything against Mr. Kraft? It's trying too hard to make him look evil, when all he's doing is being really good at selling newspapers. I would have liked it better if Sabrina was the one calling Bradley a guy with no journalistic integrity. But he should have known what the point was of the outrageous article. Selling newspapers. I heard students don't actually care about school newspapers. Not as much as pop culture around it would have you believe. Either my high school doesn't have a newspaper, or it was so forgettable that I never actually heard of it. Because I certainly never read a school newspaper before. Then we see that Coach threatened to punch Kraft over the phone for insulting his nose earlier. Doesn't he realize that's his boss? Wouldn't Kraft just fire him? Sure, it's nice of him not to. Sabrina quits on Bradley, but still looks like an idiot because she took these last photos anyways. It would be more effective if she ripped them up in front of them. He calls her another dame who can't take the heat, and his uncharacteristic behavior led to him planning on listening to that conversation and extracting some big headlines, except Sabrina's a witch. But how can she erase the memory of everyone's school when it comes to a newspaper story? Oh, she could just wait until the next assembly, and just read from her magic book. Sabrina's lucky that in all of his recording, he didn't find out she was a witch. Salem tells Sabrina that he was listening to the Other Realm radio when Sabrina was on it, and he taped some of it. Sabrina hears a conversation she had with Kraft, where she said she's reconsidering working for Bradley. So how is that supposed to make her look bad? It's obviously Bradley who's in the wrong, and she's the good guy in that situation. I'm really confused that she's on the Other Realm radio. I can believe that some of the witches would want to spy on mortals for the same reason people watch reality shows, but they're so casual about this. Sabrina says that it's terrible that someone secretly wired her, and she says scurrying on, and conveniently uses magic that shows her Bradley's plan to release a newspaper that says Kraft's secretary is hinting at insane behavior. She says that he's breaking the law, as I wonder if the reason this was caught on radio is that Bradley said this in front of a radio. But it's a radio on Earth. It just feels too convenient that Sabrina was able to find out this way. What if instead, she actually bothered to look in the camera bag and found the microtransmitter? Not to mention she obviously would have quit before getting to this point. At least she's finally going to use magic. But I'm still stuck on the fact that Salem heard Sabrina on the Other Realm radio, when she was only recorded by a mortal for the purpose of one school newspaper. It's not like she's a celebrity that the witches would really want to spy on. Sabrina uses a spell to astral project herself. She follows Bradley as he walks to the printer at home. I guess he's really into exercise. She spies the family photo album on the shelf and magically lifts a picture of the book and carries it back to the printer, where she makes a few last-minute changes to the newspaper, exposing the editor. So we see a baby photo of him on the newspaper. That's it? Bradley calls it all slander and libel and is told that he got what he deserved. Surprisingly, he admits that he's right, and says he'll go back to journalism class. Good? It's also sweet of Sabrina that this is the worst she does to him. In terms of satisfying revenge for the audience, this is nothing. The second story is Sabrina yell at Salem for chasing after birds, something that's less justified since he wasn't a cat from birth. He stupidly goes after them in front of her, so she zaps him to the top of a pine tree, and he complains that it'll take him a half hour to climb down. Salem complains that he's getting poked by pine needles and the tree's full of sap. Then Sabrina's smart enough to hide a surprise around the corner in case Salem tries it again. Why was she even bothering to have a bird feeder so close to a house with a cat in it? Wasn't it obvious she has to keep the feeder somewhere else? It turns out that the surprise for Salem is a pterodactyl, which kidnaps him instead of eating him, because I guess that's part of its spell. Sabrina fortunately explains that they were studying dinosaurs in school, so it easily popped into her head. I'm glad Zelda was unhappy with her about this. For once, she's in character instead of the comic characterization where she's happy with all kinds of magic abuse and doesn't mind making it obvious to mortals. Was it known at the time this comic came out that dinosaurs actually had feathers, and so this isn't an accurate pterodactyl at all? Probably not. I guess that's just how it's like on Sabrina's planet. Also, if she learned about dinosaurs, you'd think she'd remember learning that dinosaurs were able to exist because there was so much more oxygen for them to breathe in back then. But I guess the one she summoned has lungs that can handle modern air. Magic would probably take care of that. It's probably able to find out all knowledge. So maybe it got some cybernetic or magical lungs. Then it turns out that she can't command it to drop Salem, even though she's a witch, because bullshit. Times like this really make me wish the stories were much shorter. You'd think that a primitive mind would be even easier to control. You would barely have any independent thoughts and personality to contrast and resist Sabrina's will, because it only cared about a few things. So what's stopping her from using a different spell on it? Like making it disappear entirely? Why doesn't she warp Salem to her? Summoning ancient creatures like this would be made impossible by a combined powerful spell from the Witches' Council if this was a potential problem. If she couldn't get rid of any ancient beast she'd sap up, that'd wreak havoc on the ecosystem and reveal magic to mortals. So I'm sure that witches can zap these things away, and these people are just too stupid to try right away. Instead, Zelda takes the risk of levitating up to the pterodactyl and hitting it directly. Out of nowhere, Zelda uses magic to raise its IQ. This is what I love about this comic, it's so creative. Sometimes the writing's predictable, but sometimes there's surprises. And there's so many different spells that they can do. I was expecting them to just get rid of it. But I forgot that magic can let them take a non-violent approach. I'm just so used to Sonic, where the heroes always kill the robots. I'm glad the writer thought to have Hilda ask if the neighbors saw all of that. It's explained that they were away this week. And the story ends showing him annoying Salem by talking about Shakespearean plays and stuff. As I wonder why he wasn't teleported back to dinosaur times as soon as possible. In the next story, Sabrina tells Hilda that she has to write a sociology report about a female high-powered executive, and can't think of anyone to write about. It's just then that Enchanter shows up from the closet, and she's immediately offended that Sabrina didn't think of her. I guess she heard Sabrina because Sabrina said all that after she teleported to her. But she should know that she can't write about her because Enchantra's a witch, and Sabrina's going to a mortal high school. They can't know about witches. She just wants an ego boost. I already knew something like this was going to happen because it was referenced in the Sonic crossover. It still feels like an idiot plot because seriously, she should know that Sabrina can't refer to her by actual name and occupation. I mean, she has to know that's illegal for witches to tell mortals that they're witches, so... In fact, how is she supposed to write a report on her at all? How could she write down anything about her without revealing who she really is? She'd have to constantly use metaphors and be vague. The teacher wouldn't be happy with that. Enchantra says that her schedule would burn out most people. And I can't help but feel like Enchantra thinks of Sabrina as family, because she's totally ignoring Salem, so I don't know if he's why she's visiting. I guess he is. I mean, she is loosely connected to her family because she almost married 2 members of it. I guess her biological family doesn't know it's related to her or doesn't like her. So she clings on to this one because it's all she has. Again, I feel like she really wanted to have an excuse to be in her life. Hilda tells Enchantra that Sabrina meant her no disrespect, and because Sabrina's an idiot, Hilda has to make sure she says no. It can't be that she literally just showed up because she heard what Sabrina said before she even warped there, because that would imply that she could hear everything that everyone ever was saying, and that would drive her crazy. She'd never be able to focus. She'd never be able to hear herself think. She would turn that off if it was possible. Sabrina didn't even directly talk about her. It would make sense if she had a spell where she could hear anytime someone mentioned her, but she didn't even do that. Dell explains that this morning alone, Enchantra had 4 meetings, 2 teleconferences, a job applicant interview, and a luncheon speaking engagement. She's called Miss Enchantra? So Enchantra is her last name. And she wasn't always called Miss Enchantra, like would be realistic, because that would sound silly. Since when does anyone get called that? She intimidates Sabrina into writing the report on her by using a hologram to show her what she'd look like if she turned her house into a spider nest. I can't help but be excited at getting to see how Enchantra runs the other realm. Hilda tells Sabrina to behave, looking out for her, and Sabrina says she prefers Enchantra's new flying back into the old one. Well, duh. Enchantra says that she likes to start each day with a dangerous encounter, and tells Stella that it's time for her first appointment. Sabrina asks why she's slowing down and what's that shape looming in the darkness, and then she screams at seeing a dragon, which can talk, and hinders some of its scariness by revealing its stupid name. Oh, it turns out that his ability to speak was really taken advantage of, because he's Enchantra's job applicant. He's applying for a castle guard position, and it's amusing how seriously Enchantra's taking it, asking if he has any experience. Of course this would be mundane to a witch. But you'd think she'd just hire him on the spot, but, well, that's not legal. The dragon says that he's worked as a bouncer, served in her army, and graduated top of his class at Camelot High. Where I guess they use magic to make him short enough to go to that without bothering anyone. This feels a bit like world building, because it's explaining how the other realm is run and functions. She tells him to post himself at her castle gate and guard it for all eternity. And he says that's great job security. That was the quickest job interview ever. Cool. But couldn't you just have a magical force field generator so that there's always a force field around her castle? That'd be better than having to pay a guard. Sabrina's naturally impressed and writes down that she makes quick, confident decisions. I like Enchantra saying, "Kid, you ain't seen nothing yet." She tells Della to move on to the bankers, and Sabrina writes down that she delegates well and is firm but fair with her subordinates. Fair? Why is she assuming this? She'll turn Della into a fly or something later. Then Sabrina writes down that Enchantra isn't afraid to play hardball with the big boys, and we see out of complete nowhere that Enchantra's been throwing baseballs at baseball players, complete with their own hat. That's pretty amusing. Someone says, "I say we give her the loan and forfeit the game." I love that it's explained why she's here. It naturally ties into her job running the other realm. This is showing how she makes money. I think taxpayers would give her money, but I guess it's not enough. It is a big realm after all. It's so sweet how much Sabrina's smiling when writing her report. I wasn't expecting that. She writes down that she watched her carefully, noting how even in a bizarre setting, a corporate structure has to function. Enchantra's relatable as she says cathartically that she hates lawyers. She says, "You're bottom-feeding sharks! You're sleazy skunks! You're pond scum!" And the punchline that made me really smile is that someone says, "I wish she'd make up her mind," because she's actually turning the lawyers into all that. And since we never see them again, I'd like to believe that she undid their transformations after this. After all, she did undo Della's transformation to a fly later. I'm shocked that any lawyers were dumb enough to threaten the head witch. I'm guessing she was getting sued as a realistic consequence of always turning people into animals. But it's not realistic that anyone tried to go after her if she can do that. I think this is my favorite story in the comic. Anyway, Sabrina says that they had lunch on the fly, and it turns out that a scary-looking fly person with giant fly eyes for a head and the rest of his body is a human was paying for lunch with her. It's polite of her to thank him. I can only assume that he was doing this to suck up to her. Then she put her stockholders in the stock. Is Sabrina's teacher gonna assume she was just making a metaphor? Then Enchanter tells Sabrina that she started out as a poor pyramid washer. And she actually cries just talking about it. And once again, I'm so confused at seeing that someone grew up in Egypt without any kind of tan at all, in ancient times where immigrants weren't super common. Although Cleopatra counted. But still, Sabrina's Earth sure is weird. I guess I can make sense of it. Maybe her version of Egypt is a lot more up north. We still have deserts without them being on the equator. Texas and Las Vegas have deserts. I'm impressed that Enchanter actually has a tragic backstory, so it's a shame that it's all kept to one panel. It's not explained that she was bullied when she was a kid, or had parents that were mean to her, or gave her literally whatever she wanted. I'm just expected to assume that she turned out the way she did just because she had a difficult, boring job when she was a kid, which raised her to be resentful and get used to working hard and really wanting to get what she wants, so like to make it up to her. But you'd think she just refused to do that because she's a witch, and she could just, not do any of that with magic. I guess she happened to be born so ridiculously powerful that she just became the head witch after a magic test. Maybe she didn't know she had magic until then. I don't know how else she became head witch. We're missing a step here. Something as important as her backstory shouldn't be just one panel. But at least we saw her as a cute little kid, which is better than we got for Ixis. It was polite of her to apologize to Sabrina because she's too young to go to the goblin cocktail party. No one under 1500 is admitted there. That sounds ridiculously ageist and unfair. Sabrina thanks her and says that it was awesome and she's quite the executive. Sabrina specifically says we're allowed to protect our sources for this report. She says this, and yet Enchanter ends up furious at being fictionalized. That doesn't make any sense. What else was protect our sources supposed to mean? It's not protect our sources except for Enchantra, huh? Also, obviously I already reviewed the Sonic crossover, and it's in my Archie Sonic review playlist, so why would I review it again? This issue was by Mike Gallagher. The first story was about Sabrina trying to become a school newspaper photographer, and the editor puts a camera bug in her bag to get conversations recorded so we can sell newspapers better. This lying is shown as wrong because Kraft gets mad, but Kraft did say what he was called out on saying. It's karma. But then the editors made a jerk for trying to make a fake story involving a secretary. First off, Sabrina realized what he was doing, but somehow she didn't quit right away and instead took some photos anyways. Whatever. It could be at least brought up that she could brainwash him into not wanting to do this anymore, and then she could shoot it down by saying that brainwashing is wrong. But I guess we're supposed to assume that's why she didn't do that. I'm so confused that Salem heard her talking on the other realm radio. Wouldn't it make sense if he simply found a bug in her camera bag? Wouldn't she have found it? It could have easily made sense. Instead, I felt like it was way too convenient that Sabrina found out about his plan. Because, magic. I guess because he was near a radio when he said that, she was able to make the radio a recording device of her own. So she astral projects herself to put his baby photo in the school newspaper, which was pretty cool of her, and he somehow learns his lesson and quits. I don't think he went through quite enough for how often he was drawn as smirking. I would have preferred if he was portrayed as cheerfully smiling all this shit, like he did at the start. Having him smile like a normal person did a better job making him a creepy villain. It was more realistic. Making him smirk is there to make him unlikable, but it also came out of nowhere trying way too hard to make him look evil to the point where I didn't take it seriously as much. The second story is about Salem's chasing after birds being punished because Sabrina summons a pterodactyl on him, which is specifically programmed to only carry him instead of trying to eat him right away. And yet she couldn't brainwash him into letting go of Salem. And yet Zelda was able to make him a genius just fine. So why didn't she make him vanish? Right away! That only happened to waste panels in the story, but it's more interesting to see. It was definitely creative. The third story was really fantastic. I was impressed at getting to see a day in the life of Enchantra. This is the kind of things you don't get to see with characters like Eggman or the evil twins from Archie Sonic. I saw her take a job interview for a castle guard, relatably get mad at lawyers, and put stockholders in stocks. It was using puns, but in a visual humor way that only witches could show off. I guess she made Sabrina write a report on her so she'd feel good about being praised. And it was sweet that Sabrina actually enjoyed herself and got some respect for her. But that one panel where she says that she's allowed to protect her sources really makes it confusing that Enchantra will get mad at being fictionalized. What did she think was going to happen? Sabrina's going to Immortal High School. She knows that. Did she want Sabrina to get an F by being honest about her and looking like she was lying? I guess so, but why would she be that spiteful to her? In most of the comic, unlike you'd expect from the Sonic crossover where she seems like her mortal enemy, in most of the comic she actually seems like she wants to help Sabrina. Like she sent her to that witch school for her own good. She wouldn't want anyone to get an F for writing a report that compliments her. I always assumed the report on her would have been Sabrina's idea, but it is nice that she was genuine about her compliments. I'm not sure if I actually saw Enchantra run the country though. She didn't make any new laws, or go over any. She hired one person, had lunch, dealt with some lawyers and stockholders. That's pretty vague. No wonder Sabrina could call her a CEO. And it's a problem that I completely forgot about the one panel where we saw her backstory. She was a poor pyramid builder as a kid. Apparently on Sabrina's Earth, ancient Egyptians forced little children to build pyramids. So how did she become the head witch from there? That was pretty important. There's a reason I assumed she spent her whole life in the other realm. I already reviewed the issue after this. It's in the Archie Sonic playlist.